Hello. Good afternoon. Welcome to our podcast. This is Kevin Deveji, your host at American Business Podcast for the Next Generation. I'm excited to welcome you today to our podcast. And we have a guest today, an expert in his subject. We have Mike Aisher with us from One World Supply Chain Consulting Company. And we have a lot to cover today to make sure you receive the educational content that we promise every week. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kevin. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll be talking about today manufacturing industry in the US, American manufacturing, as well as the supply chain. And also, every week we promise our audience and our listeners an educational, informative content. So I'm sure we're going to deliver today. Let's start with introductions, if that's okay, Mike. As a start, would you please introduce yourself and your company for our audience and for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So, Mike Aisher, I'm the founder and CEO of One Word Supply Chain Consulting. We are an end-to-end supply chain consulting firm focused on the small to middle market manufacturers and distributors. And our goal is to help them streamline and make their supply chains more efficient in an ever-changing and dynamic supply chain world.
Yes, I know you have years of experience in your field, and we have a lot to learn from you today. And also, you are in supply chain. You work with manufacturers a lot on in day-to-day operations of your company. Would you please tell us how did you choose your career?
Sure. Yeah, my career was an interesting journey. Certainly, I went to school to be a CPA. I wanted to be an accountant like my father, following his footsteps. And then I took a couple accounting classes and realized that accounting wasn't likely going to be for me. So a friend of mine at school said, "Hey, supply chain is." At the time, it wasn't called supply chain, but supply chain is a thing that is. Michigan State University, where I went to school, is always ranked in the top 3 to 5 in the country. And he said at the time that was an area that people were employing. So certainly wanting to get a job out of college, I dove right in, and I've been in the industry ever since. And I can't tell you, I always tell people outside of being a professional baseball player, which left me long ago, I couldn't have asked for a better career. So I really enjoyed it.
That's great. Okay, yeah, absolutely. It's important to do, what we like, what we love. Then it takes us to the next level. Absolutely. So one of the questions that we always ask to our speakers, our guests, is what are the challenging and exciting parts of your career?
Yeah, I would say they're equally the same. They're basically the same thing. So the supply chain world, as it relates to manufacturers and distribution, is there's always going to be some chaos or chaotic event or events. So certainly the pandemic put a shining light on that for everybody, the criticality of the supply chain. But there are smaller events that happen too, like the bridge collapse in Baltimore last year. There are always things that are going to disrupt the supply chain. So being able to try to anticipate that and try to work through that is also the challenging side of it, but it's also the fun side of it as well, because through chaos comes innovation, and you really get the opportunity to think critically and strategically on how to diversify your supply chain to be able to overcome those instances. So I'd say they're one and the same ultimately.
Yes, absolutely. And you work with manufacturers often as part of their supply chain operations. You also witness many of their challenges as well as their success stories. So, based on your observation and professional experience, how is the US manufacturing industry nowadays?
Well, certainly in the very current market, this is very topical with things going on. Certainly, the questions around tariffs and institution of different tariffs for different countries is really changing the trajectory of American manufacturing, potentially at least. I think the goal of trying to push more manufacturing to the U.S. Is real, and you're going to see that certainly as a byproduct of this. Some of the challenges around that are certainly the infrastructure in the U.S., specifically talking labor. Do we have the existing labor force and labor market that will come in and be able to do those types of roles that support manufacturing jobs? So that to me is a very interesting time. We're working with a lot of manufacturers and distributors on diversification of supply currently with the different tariffs that are going on. And we're looking at different areas, diversification beyond Southeast Asia, looking at other countries. and really trying to drill into their total landed cost to really understand at each SKU level what their total landed cost is, and is there a better solution, and setting them up for success so they can continue to evaluate that as the markets continue to change.
Yes, this is very important. The supply chain management is a top concern for many manufacturers. That actually started during the COVID time. That really hit it at that time, and we are still experiencing it. It looks like it. So for manufacturers to actually stabilize the supply chain issues, how are they doing based on your experience, and what they should do to manage the costs in addition to what you mentioned earlier?
Sure. It really is a depends kind of answer, right? It depends on
Mhm.
the 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 expertise that they have within their organization. So some companies, I think the best case that they need to do is they need to continue to evaluate their supply chain, having the tools to run what if scenarios. Looking at, I mean, it starts from certainly raw materials or or finished goods based on what they're bringing in, but it's all the way through the value chain. Do they have the right? Are they in the right locations? Are they, are they focused on a quality distribution network that they can then lean on, and it's adaptable. So as we talked about, supply chain issues happen all the time. So having that ability to pivot, and not just be reactive, but be proactive as well. So continuing those that do it well and have it as a differentiator are those that are actively working on their supply chain consistently. So those that struggle, and through no fault of their own, often they have a great product, they know how to do it, they know how to build it, they know how to sell it, but distributing it often can be a struggle. So that's where we try to come in and help them say, hey, there may be better ways or better opportunities to streamline your supply chain to make you more competitive and we try to turn them into a best in class organization if we can. We try to help them.
Yes, especially nowadays, tariffs are actually in the news. We hear about it, we learn about it, and that's also challenging for manufacturers as well to adapt the change
Yep.
as well as their supply chain. That's how it looks like it, and we'll see how it's gonna go. It looks like we get some new updates and developments every single day about tariffs.
Yep.
So it's absolutely affecting manufacturers and will be affecting
Yep.
for sure. So let's talk about the manufacturers and their adaptation to high technology.
Mhm.
So utilizing technology for manufacturers, especially U.S. manufacturing, is critical to be competitive nationally and internationally. Based on your observation and experience, how do you see manufacturers are adapting to high technology in their operations, and what do you see moving forward? Let's say next 5 years is going to be for manufacturers in terms of high technology implementations.
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, it's certainly the adoption of robotics in manufacturing facilities. Certainly, there's certainly industries that do that very well, and others that are still in the infancy of that. So I think that's going to be an important, as we talk about labor and questions around labor to support these manufacturing organizations as they start to build and scale in the U.S. I think automation is going to be the first tip of the spear, if you will, from a productivity standpoint. So those that are leaning into it, and not just on the manufacturing floor, but also on the movement of goods. So certainly, robotic processes, moving of goods from good to person to even unloading at their docks to try to automate as much as possible. Second piece is certainly leaning into the technology space from a back office, right? Oftentimes you see organizations that have this great tech in the front, and they're like Jetsons in the front and Flintstones in the back, right? So there's just this thing that they're not leaning into technology on the backside. So I think you're going to see a
Yes,
lot of
I like your analogy. Yes, absolutely.
you're going to start a lot of companies start to lean into more, and certainly AI is a huge piece of that, and how that's going to change the organizations and how they think and work.
Yes, let's talk about AI, right? That's an important subject matter. It's also very popular. So, what is your take in terms of AI? What is your take on the AI? How it's going to change our lives? How it is changing right now? We are actually experiencing on daily basis, pretty much. How it's going to change our life, manufacturers, as well as business world.
I mean, there's different schools of thought on that, and certainly, I think AI is a phenomenal tool for us to leverage and use to help streamline. and really to help us reduce and automate redundant tasks that maybe are non-value added. So really helping folks that can focus on adding value to the organization. Now, like anything, AI is right now, it's only as good as the people that are working with it. So I think that you're starting to see that kind of that job shift and, AI adoption. Those folks, they call them prompt engineers. I heard that term. Those folks are going to be critical for organizations because they're going to need to know and how to leverage AI within organizations. I know a lot of organizations want to make sure that they have a captive AI system so their data is not out being shared or being compromised. So I know data and data security is certainly a top of mind for most organizations as well. But I think if you're not leaning into AI some way, shape, or form, you're certainly going to be behind. If you're not doing it now, you're probably already behind the eight ball. So it's an important piece, and it's going to continue just to grow as the AI engines become more powerful and the tools become more readily accessible and easy to access and use.
Yes, that's true. I think it's more accessible than before, also more practical, especially just like you mentioned, robots are coming in. They have been around, it's not new, but it's more accessible nowadays. So it's going to be absolutely a game changer. And it's very exciting to witness this evolution in
Yeah.
a way, how AI is affecting our businesses on daily basis. So it's an exciting journey. I like to, take your view in terms of coming years. So a couple of things are very important for manufacturing and supply chain in terms of economy, general economy, economic conditions, as well as the job market. What is your take in terms of the features? What are your predictions for 2025 and beyond moving
Ooh,
forward? How it's going to be?
that's an interesting one right now
Yes,
because
a lot to unpack. Yes.
we are in a constantly changing environment right now, and I think, yeah, I believe what I've seen, at least, certainly a lot of folks were waiting until the election to see what happened, to see what they
Mhm.
were going to do strategically. So I think once we got through post-election, then things started to kind of loosen up and organizations started to do more planning. But certainly now with the questions on tariffs, what that's going to look like, when it's going to be implemented, what's not, what is, that is causing additional kind of chaos, and people are starting to think, hold back and think more critically again. So I see it continuing. At least, again, it's gonna really be driven by the tariff policies and what ends up happening and when it ends up happening. I think you're going to continue to see organizations diversify their supply, looking for other trade friendly countries and seeing how we can leverage those trade friendly countries. Like certainly South America could be a great option. Africa is that sleeping giant that certainly isn't ready yet, but some point in time, Africa is going to be probably a very strong global player as well. So I think for the short term, it's going to be really those that have adaptability and have processes in place to really look critically at their supply chain, their manufacturing operations will lead the charge on being ahead of the game. The others will possibly struggle to adapt and to maintain share and maintain profitability. I mean, certainly the question will be, does that get passed on to the end consumer, right? So at the end of the day,
Yes.
so that will be a question for sure. From a labor market standpoint, the second part of that question, it's
Mhm.
going to be, again, I think it's a unique thing as well, because I think a lot of organizations are starting to kind of put a hold on that based on they're not sure where they're going to go, so they want to know. A lot of hiring is starting to slow again. It always usually slows at the end of the year because companies do, they're protecting their profitability and they want to hit their bottom line numbers at the end of the year. And it usually frees up January, February, and it started to, and it's kind of slowed a little bit. But I mean, there's still companies are still hiring for critical roles, and I see that kind of continuing till whatever this is going to look like, what it shakes out to, and there's some predictability, and organizations know where they're headed. So, yeah.
Yes, that's very critical. Also, the first part of the question that you address, the international trade, yeah, right? In terms of the Africa, South America becomes more important than before in terms of supply chain. That's also an exciting subject matter. And this just shifted towards the job market and also the future workforce. What is your take on internship programs and apprenticeship programs to develop future workforce?
I think they're great. I think that it's certainly dependent upon what types of, you know, on the corporate world, internship, certainly on the skilled trades world, apprenticeships. I think that is truly where you're going to learn the real world experience, right? So
Mhm.
you're going to understand, you're going to get a flavor for what you like and what you don't like. And I think, um, I'm a product of a university. A lot of us are. I think you go into a university at 17 years old and you're supposed to determine the rest of your life, right? And most of us at 17 years old don't really have an idea what we want to be when we grow up. So,
Yes.
and that's changed dramatically now with the advent of social media and certainly influencers and all the kind of stuff that goes around that as well. So there's just a different sensibility with folks in the labor market today. So I think that's going to continue to be an interesting dynamic in how. But I think that again, the internships and apprenticeships are key for people to get understanding of, gives them the opportunity to work in a field and say, okay, I like this, I don't like it, I'm not sure, so it gives them some opportunities to further explore um, their what they may or may not like and find their passion. I'm all about people finding their passion, because if you find your passion, what's the saying, you never work a day in your life, right? So,
Yes, I think that's a great quote. Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, to your point, I mean, in a young age, to make those important decisions are not easy. Absolutely. So absolutely, the internship is a great introductions to the industry or to a profession. So I think that's very exciting. Also, in coming weeks, we'll be also talking about apprenticeship programs. So there are really structured apprenticeship programs for manufacturing industry, and get the next generation to work in manufacturing, because one of the challenges in manufacturing is getting the talent and introducing manufacturing to the next generation. Nowadays, you also witness it yourself. The manufacturing environment, the work environment is modern, and there's a lot of high tech operations involved, just like we discussed earlier. So the introductions of manufacturing to the next generation is critical. So apprenticeship programs definitely serve that purpose. So we definitely love to emphasize also in coming weeks as well at our podcast. Also, you talk about the passion, right, to having the right career, so that it's not gonna be like a job. You're just gonna be doing what you enjoy with people that you like to enjoy, you like to work with. So that's also very exciting piece of advice. One of the important missions of our podcast is to share these ideas and suggestions with the next generation. We have a mix of audience from the current generation and the next generation coming in, so that's definitely important to share it at our podcast. Also, what are your suggestions for the next generation workforce and the new generation coming in as
sure.
future leaders? What would be your suggestions for them to choose their career path, as well as furthering the career path that they chose?
I try to tell individuals, younger generation individuals, be curious. Try to understand and explore areas that you may not think sound exciting or interesting, but those
Mhm.
may end up actually being the most interesting things you've ever done. And I have a personal example. I spent about 4.5 years in the cement industry, and if you'd have told me coming out of college that I would have worked in cement, I would have told you that there's no way. It doesn't sound interesting, doesn't sound fun, but it was
Mhm.
literally one of probably the best times in my career I've ever had. It was just transformational for me. Learned a ton about an industry that I knew nothing about at the time. So when we talk to students, we talk at Central Michigan every once in a while. We talk to some students, and I tell them, everyone wants to go to Lululemon or Nike or the companies that everybody knows about, but
Mhm.
there are so many companies out there that will provide you with unique and interesting challenges that may be in an industry that you never thought sounds interesting at all. So that's why I say be curious, and don't close your eyes or ears to opportunities that may not hit the box from an exciting standpoint.
Mhm.
But when you get into it, you'll be surprised. It will probably it oftentimes is more exciting than the brand name company that everybody knows. So and I tell young people, have passion. Again, we talked about passion. For me, when I look
Yes.
to hire people, or look for talent. I look for passion and energy, because you can teach anybody anything, but if you don't have the passion and desire to learn it, then you're not going to, I mean, you can still be productive and do well in society and in your career, but you won't probably ascend to that next level that you may want to go to. So, and then your part about leadership. So that's an interesting one, because leadership isn't always taught, right? I mean, there's a piece of leadership empathy that is a key piece of leadership in today's world. You may have a team of 50 people, but each one of those individuals has something different. They learn differently, they're inspired differently. So as a leader, you have to learn to be able to adapt to those individuals on a one-on-one basis. And I tell people the hardest thing you'll ever do as a leader is becoming a leader for the first time, because you go from an individual contributor to a leader. So you're leading people without really any real experience with it, going into it, right? So I always tell people that's going to be the hardest transition you're going to make, because you're used to contributing and doing and having this. I've got tangible results, whereas when you're leading, it's not always a tangible result. So that's a challenge and a shift that individuals need to make in their leadership journey.
Yes, these are really important points, much appreciated, especially for the next generation. Nowadays, it's easier to access information, right? They can learn faster, they can get and observe more information in a shorter period of time. And on top of it, these important suggestions based on experience is also very critical and very helpful. Before we are coming to the end of our podcast, would you like to share any message with the next generation before we end our episode?
Yeah, I would say, again, kind of doubling down on what I said, just being curious and learning. And I would say networking. The power of networking in today's world is so much more important than it was in the past. With all the opportunities you have with LinkedIn, networking groups, there's a saying out there: your network is your net worth. So lean into your network, because that's where your community is going to come from. That's where possibly, you never know where different job opportunities are going to come from, because your network is really drives it can drive you educationally, because I get to meet a lot of people in a lot of industries that I would have never met had I not been in networking groups or had done networking heavily. So again, it goes back to just being curious and just asking questions, connecting with people. Most of us that have been in the industry, we want to give back and we want to provide feedback and experience. So it's an honor to be able to mentor younger individuals in a career that I've thoroughly enjoyed and will continue to enjoy until I don't feel like doing this anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Mike, thank you very much for sharing your insights, your wisdom with us and with our audience. Thank you. And I'm going to see you soon, hopefully in May at the trade show. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. Thank you very much. And also to our audience and to our listeners, thank you for joining today's podcast. Looking forward to seeing you at our coming episode sessions at American Business Podcast for the Next Generation. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Kevin.
My pleasure.